What if I told you that Africa once ruled Egypt? What if I told you that Egypt's pharaohs were, for a time, black kings from deeper in the continent? And what if I told you that long after the fall of the pharaohs, long after Julius Caesar was crowned, long after Rome declared itself the master of the world, one African empire stood up and said no. They didn't just resist Rome, they defeated Rome. Their name was Kush. And their story is one of the greatest chapters in African and world history. Before there was Kush, there was Nubia, an ancient land stretching along the Nile in what is today northern Sudan and southern Egypt. To the ancient Egyptians, Nubia was a land of gold, cattle, warriors, and exotic goods. But Nubians were not just traders. They were builders, artists, kings. By 2500 BCE, over 4,000 years ago, they were already forming kingdoms of their own, including Ta Seti, Egypt's southern rival. The Egyptians feared them, respected them, and eventually conquered parts of Nubia. But Nubia did not disappear. It evolved, and from its heartland rose a kingdom more powerful than anything the world expected: Kush. By 1070 BCE, Egypt had weakened. Civil wars, invasions, corruption. Meanwhile, in the city of Napata, a new power was rising. Kush had reorganized, rebuilt, and remembered. Around 750 BCE, a Kushite king named Paye did what no African leader had done before. He invaded Egypt. But this wasn't just war. This was a reclamation. He saw Egypt in chaos, saw the gods dishonored, and marched north not to loot, but to restore. He conquered city after city without bloodshed. His army surrounded Thebes, the religious capital. He wrote a declaration in stone, commanding Egyptian priests to submit, not by sword, but by the will of the gods. They obeyed. And just like that, Pa became pharaoh. The 25th dynasty of Egypt had begun. And for nearly a century, black African kings ruled Egypt. They built temples, restored monuments, protected traditions. Among them was Taharka, Pa's nephew, one of the greatest pharaohs in Egyptian history. Taharka ruled over a vast empire, from the Mediterranean to the deep south of Sudan. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a visionary. He built temples at Karnak, added to the sacred complex of Jebel Barkal, and erected statues that still stand today. He confronted Assyrian invaders, one of the most feared militaries of the time, and delayed their conquest of the Near East. He made alliances with Judah, Phoenicia, and Israel. Some biblical scholars believe he is mentioned in the book of Isaiah as the king of Egypt and Kush, who rose to help Jerusalem. This was not a minor king. This was a ruler of global importance. But time, as always, brings change. The Assyrians eventually pushed Kushites out of Egypt, but the empire did not die. It returned south to a new capital, Meroe. Meroe was not just a retreat. It became one of the most advanced cities of the ancient world. Situated along the fertile banks of the Nile, Meroe thrived for nearly 800 years. It had iron foundries. Long before Europe's industrial age, a written script, the Meroitic language, still undeciphered monuments and pyramids, over 200, more than in Egypt itself. A rich pantheon of gods blending Egyptian and indigenous Nubian beliefs. A powerful class of queens called Candaces. Yes, Meroe was ruled at times by black warrior queens who commanded armies, negotiated treaties, and even faced off against the greatest empire the world had seen, Rome. In 30 BCE, Rome conquered Egypt. Cleopatra was dead. Augustus Caesar declared himself pharaoh, and the Roman Empire now bordered the African kingdom of Kush. Rome assumed it would dominate, but Kush had other plans. Around 25 BCE, the reigning queen of Kush, Candace Amanirenas, launched a surprise attack. She invaded Roman-controlled Egypt. Her armies captured cities like Syene, Aswan, and even defaced a statue of Caesar, a political middle finger to Roman arrogance. Rome responded. A Roman governor, Petronius, marched south with 10,000 troops. He burned Napata, desecrated temples, enslaved civilians. But Amanirenas did not surrender. She retreated strategically, then counterattacked. And then, something unexpected happened. Rome offered peace. They signed a treaty that returned conquered territory, established peaceful trade, recognized Kush as an independent power. Let that sink in. The Roman Empire, the empire that burned Carthage to the ground, compromised with an African kingdom. They could not defeat Kush. Kush survived for centuries after its war with Rome. It continued to mint coins, export goods, worship gods, build pyramids, and while it eventually declined due to trade shifts, drought, and emerging powers, it left behind a legacy carved in stone. The pyramids of Meroe still stand. The statues of Taharqa are still worshipped in silence. The ruins of Napata still echo with royal chants. But perhaps Kush's greatest legacy is this. It proved that Africa was not just a victim of history, it was a maker of history. Kush conquered Egypt, ruled as pharaohs, faced down Rome, built cities, languages, and laws. And even when forgotten by textbooks, it remained undefeated by truth. So why don't we hear about Kush? Because Kush doesn't fit the colonial script. It's easier to teach Africa as a place of tribes and victims, not cities, not pharaohs, not queens who challenged Caesar. Western historians downplayed it, called it a shadow of Egypt, dismissed it as derivative. Even today, the Meroitic script is still not taught widely. The ruins of Kush don't appear in global documentaries. Few African students grow up hearing of Amanaranas. This is no accident, but the sands are shifting, and Kush is rising again. This is the story of an empire built by Africans, ruled by Africans, that once wore the crown of pharaohs and later stood face to face with the Caesars, not with fear, but with fire. This is not just African history, this is world history, and it's time the world knew it. This is Echoes of Africa. This is Kush, the empire that defied Rome,